Hello, I'm Ward, and today I'm going to be recoring the port side bow of my 1969 Iroquois Mach 2 catamaran project boat. So let's get started. Make sure that when you set the depth, you're not cutting through the inside skin, or you're going to have a whole lot more work. I think that is safe. So, this is the scary part right here. Cutting through the deck. All right, let's get started. Oh, make sure you got ear protection and eye protection. You know, one little tiny piece of fiberglass in your eye will ruin your whole day. You know what I almost forgot? Don't forget something to... This Dremel makes quick work of it, but make sure that you have a steel blade for it and not a wood blade, because it won't last but a few seconds. You're not going to get into the corners. So we're going to use the multi-tool for that. Also, I'd like to mention that fiberglass dust is very hard on power tools. So it might be worth it to go to Harbor Freight and buy some inexpensive ones instead of using your good stuff, because it's going to really shorten the life. So there you go. Let's see what's going on under here. It's not too bad. It's wet. If it's still laminated, it's not going to come up easy. So if you are planning on reusing the skin, be careful and just try and get up the corners and work your way around. Don't damage your skin unless you don't plan on reusing it, which I don't, but I'm still going to be careful because I might want to use it for the stencil. All right, this is going to take some finesse. Take your time, do it right. Oh, that's wet in there. Oh yeah.
shiprock, boss.
That inside skin is going to be thinner and more fragile than the outside. So if you wedge a tool in there and you start lifting up underneath this outside skin, you are liable to poke a hole in it, which I did on the other side. So really just take your time, man. Just take your time. If your through holes were done correctly, they would have over drilled the hole and then filled it with resin or epoxy and then drilled it again for the deck hardware. And I believe that's the case with this. So I'm going to take the scraper and wedge it underneath of here and hit it with a hammer and knock those loose. If you have through holes that you can't reach with a tool like a scraper, you can also just drill the holes out with an oversized bit and that'll work too. I'm tired of fiddling with it, so I'm just going to rip it up and make a stencil using plastic. Got some old plywood here. That's in good shape. Lovely. Let's rip it off. The rest of this isn't coming off easily. It's actually become quite a challenge. So I'm going to take the multi-tool and cut it into small, more manageable pieces. It does have a story to tell. 55 years this deck has been on here, and I'm just curious to see what lies beneath. But Captain Ward, you ask, how would I know if I have a soft deck? Seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? Let me explain. This is a little tricky and it doesn't always give you a good reading, but you can take the handle of a screwdriver or, something that's maybe not as hard as a hammer, and you can give it a tap. Now, if it's full of water, it's not going to sound hollow. And this is actually full of water, but you'll notice a very slight difference. But if it's dry and it's delaminated, it'll sound hollow because there's going to be air in between the laminate and this outer skin of fiberglass. But if it's filled with water, it's going to be a lot more difficult to detect. But listen closely. You can tell that's hollow. The opposite side of the deck. Okay, now back to the soft spot. Hard spot. Soft spot. Okay, if you step on this, it's going to give a little bit. The other side does not. The other side does not. I can feel that solid. That's not good. And I keep forgetting to mention, once you've started to cut the outside skin off of the deck, don't stand on it anymore. If you're a big fella, you might just fall through. Right here where they used plywood, that did not stick, and up there it didn't stick. And right here it didn't stick, and you can see this is all wet around here and around there, and it wasn't laminated right here. It was laminated pretty well, but not around all the other edges. So if you know a better way to remove this, let me know in the comments. And if you don't and you're curious, read the comments, and maybe somebody's got a better idea. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Moving forward, I've started removing the core using the multi-tool, like so. And and it cuts right through the balsa wood. But I will say the places where I didn't get all of the fiberglass off is considerably more difficult to peel up. Places like this, that'll pop right out of there. Went ahead and cleaned this all up. Now we need to remove the coring from the inside here, which I'm not sure exactly how far it goes back, but a little ways. And this is going to be fiddly. You could try a screwdriver. Before you run out and buy new coring, check the thickness of the old coring. My coring is thinner, slightly thinner, which is fine because I want to add more fiberglass. You can see how this is pretty thin. And it held up great, but I really want this to be a tank. So anything that I do to the boat, I'm going to try and overbuild it as long as I'm not adding a lot of weight. And I would say between these two decks, I've maybe added 15 pounds to the original. So if you're just going to be reskinning it, you want to make sure and get the same thickness, or else you're going to have a problem. So keep that in mind. The winner and undefeated champion is the multi-tool. Just get in there and wiggle it around carefully, and it gets the job done. So that's the tool for that job. I know it's only been a little over 15 minutes, but it feels like it's been 16 hours-ish and a few wardrobe changes. I'm not gonna lie to you, but this deck did not come up easily. The starboard deck did. It almost just ripped right up. There was some patchwork where that was laminated really well, something that they had done later, some repair. But this one was in much better condition. So really, the worse condition that your deck is in, the easier it's going to come apart. The only reason that I didn't just kind of patch the wet spots and replace them with new coring is because I did the other side, and I built that like a tank. So I didn't want this one to be the weak one. I want to do both. Whatever I do to one side, I want to make sure that the other side is done equally well. So maybe OCD, whatever. I think it's just doing it right. But anyhow, all I'm saying is, if you are planning on doing a project like this and you are sitting at home right now watching this video alone in the dark, I really hope your deck is soft. Let's get to work, shall we? The next phase of this project is going to be mixing up some thickened resin. And I keep my chemicals in here because, frankly, they're quite smelly. And a lot of sun comes into the cabin. And you don't want these things sitting in direct sunlight because it will shorten the life of them. Let me pull these out and I'll show you what we're going to be using on the project today. I have 6 cups. I'm not sure if that's going to be enough to go all the way around the edge of the bow, but it's a good start. You want to mix everything up at the same time, and that way you don't have to spend a lot of time mixing each one up, and you know, you might end up having different consistencies. You'd like them to be all the same, and we want it to be as thick as possible to shove back in there without getting any air pockets, but you don't want it to ooze out, because we really want a nice flat edge. And if you don't get a nice flat edge, well, you're going to cause more work for yourself. So let's start at the beginning. I have acetone, a really neat trick that I learned from, what was his name, Joe Buskins on Fish Bump TV. That guy has a great YouTube channel. I hang on his every word. That man is a master, and his videos are so informative. You have to watch him twice because he just gives you so much information. I really can't recommend enough that you watch Fish Bump TV. He has tons of videos, and it's one of my favorites. Another one that I really love is Sail Life. He's on his third refit. Oh, Andy from Boatworks Today. He's a professional, and you know, all of these guys are much better at this than me, and most of the things that I learned were from watching their channels. I've literally watched hundreds of hours of tutorials on how to fiberglass. Acetone. Inside of here, I have some things that you're going to want to clean off afterwards. You're going to need some nice spreaders, some nice wide ones. That way you get a good even surface. This is a fin roller. And the fin roller is going to get all the bubbles out of your surface and give you a much better bond, and ultimately you're going to do a much better job if you get those air bubbles out. So a little bit of acetone in there. Again, I got this tip from Fish Bump TV. And an old Gatorade bottle for acetone. That way you can put it on a rag easily, and you don't have to use a large bucket and fiddle with that. If you got any kids running around, or anybody really, you know, you don't want to, I'm pretty sure if you drank this, that'd be the end of it for you. But you need to clean your surface, that way you get a better bond. These gloves were designed for acetone, and if you try and use regular gloves for that, which we'll use for the resin, the acetone will eat right through these. So get yourself some good gloves. You're gonna make a mess somehow, some way. It's gonna happen. So some shop towels, you know, some rags that you don't care about. When you put the gloves on and you're putting the thickened resin down, you can double up on the gloves. Put 2 gloves on each hand, and that way when they get all sticky and you can't work anymore, you can just peel those off and you still got gloves on. I think I also got that from Joe Buskins. Some scrap chop strand. We're going to cut those up into little pieces, about, you know, maybe a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch, lots of them, and we're going to end up putting that in our mix. That's going to give it tensile strength. You want it to be as strong as possible, but if the pieces are too long, it's not going to be clean, and if they're too short, it's not going to be as strong. So I would say about, you know, maybe a 1/4 inch, and for you ladies, that's 6 inches. Scissors to cut the fiberglass with. Our mixing cups. I'm putting 6 cups out. You want your mix to be consistent, so I'm going to try and put equal amounts of everything into the thickened resin. Mix it up real good, stir stick. You know, that way you don't have to come down and mix it up again each time. Film silica is used as an additive filler to really thicken that resin up. And if you happen to have, you know, a little spoon from Wendy's or something like that, which I don't have, so I'm gonna have to use this, so a lot more work. A spoon would be better, something to, you know, I don't know. I guess I can use this and put it in there carefully. Make sure that you got a face mask on, especially if there's any wind. Really be careful with this because it's horrible for you. It's a very fine powder. So, okay. And here we have, this is pure iso resin. When I first started working with fiberglass, I was really confused about what kind of resins to use. So let me break it down. This is what I've learned. There are basically 4 different kinds of resin that I know of. I believe the only thing that was available back in the day was polyester resin. And then you have pure iso resin. Now, in between those two, you have a blend. And correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe that that's polyester, pure iso, and then the blend of the two. And then you have epoxy resin, which is a completely different animal. The procedure is basically the same, but there are some pros and cons to that one for sure. Your weakest is going to be the polyester resin. Next up is the blend. And then even stronger yet is pure iso, what I'm using. And the strongest resin is going to be epoxy resin. I am going to be using that underneath the waterline because it is also the most waterproof and the strongest. So we'll get into that much later down the road. One big advantage to using pure iso or any polyester resin is that you can mix up your batches, and as long as you don't put the hardener in there, they can sit in the shade for hours, maybe all day long, without setting up. Hardener. There are different kinds of hardeners, and to be honest, I'm no expert on what kind of hardeners, but if you go to your fiberglass supply house, they're going to tell you what kind of hardener is going to be best for whatever resin you're using. Now here you have a dispenser. You can squeeze it down here and it'll give you that, you know, the proper mix. And with polyester resins, you're only using 1 to 2%. So it's very easy to tell how many milliliters you have because, you know, your mixing cups are gonna have measurements on them. So today it's hot. I'm probably just gonna use 1%. It does make it stronger if you have more in there, but it's gonna set up much quicker in the sun. If you have 2%, you're not gonna have a big working time. Chemically, it's gonna get really hot if you put 2% and it's cooking in the sun. So try and keep everything in the shade as much as you can. Pro tip, when you're done using this, put some gloves on, unscrew this lid and pull the little straw off of there. Otherwise, overnight, it's gonna start filling up and it'll pop that cap off, pour down and get all over the place. And if you get a whiff of this, it smells horrible. It just smells like it's bad for you. So, you know, not a bad idea to have a mask on or just hold your breath because gross. That's gross. It smells awful. Okay. Before you pour your resin, make sure you stir it up the best that you can because it does settle and you're not gonna get a good bond if it comes out clumpy. it's going to be a mess. So there you go. I have about 400 milliliters in each mixing cup, and that's important because your hardener is going to be based on how much resin you have and not the silica and the fiberglass. Make sure that you measure it just based on the resin. All containers are pretty much the same consistency. They're about the thickness of peanut butter. If you wanted to be more scientific, you could use, and in hindsight, I probably should have used another mixing container and put the amount of silica that you wanted in that and just poured it in carefully with a mask on and repeat. That way you had exactly the same consistency. I just kind of eyeballed it, but I'm a heathen. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the fiberglass. We're going to cut it into 1/4-inch strips and chop. Take as long as you want doing this. It can sit here all day long. But once you put the hardener in, you have 10, maybe 12 minutes at the most of working time, especially in the Florida heat. So now be careful with your scissors. And I was thinking, man, this is really time consuming. And then I remembered at the fiberglass supply house, you can buy chop strand already cut up. And it's funny because when I saw that, I was like, who'd want that? You could cut it yourself for much less. I did this on the other bow also, but I guess I forgot how much time it took to do it. So if you're fancy, you can just buy this already done, and that wouldn't be a bad thing. So as you cut them up, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go ahead and give each one a stir before you start cutting more on the next one, because that gives it time. The resin will break down the adhesive that's in the chop strand. If you're using epoxy, it doesn't work. Epoxy won't soak in to chop strand, and I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the chemicals in it don't play nicely with chop strand. Again, I don't know much about, you know what, this is the wrong tool for this. It's too thick right now to use this little tongue depressor, so we're gonna use something a little bit more heavy duty. You can get these free at Home Depot if you distract the cashier. You can just grab a whole bunch of them and run. Another tool that I really like is this random stick I found. That's one of my most valuable tools, and it was free. So give this a good mix. It's not gonna mix easy. It's pretty thick now. I don't know, there's a little bit of guesswork in this because, I mean, who's to say I have enough in there? It's really hard to tell. Again, if you wanted to be really scientific about it. You could take another mixing cup and put however much you want in there, pour it in there. I don't know. I think there's maybe about this much, but you know, I don't know. It seems like it's enough. I can see the fibers and stuff, so I think I'm going to call it good on that. So I'll cut about 10 more 2-foot strips, 1/4 inch squares, chop them up into each one. So when I go up top, I'll grab this one first, and that way the other ones have time to kind of soak it up. And then you're going to be mixing it again when you put the hardener in there. But don't put the hardener in all of them, okay? Because you know, and I'm not going to do that on film because, you know, you got to move quick. But give it a squeeze. I have to put that straw back on there, so I'm going to take this off, put the straw on there. You give it a squeeze. You're going to, in this case, because it's hot, 1%. And I don't know that you'll see it, but this is designed to go with the milliliters. So I know that I had 400 milliliters in each one. So I'm going to want to go to 4. And there's the 5 right there. So, you know, pretty much the 5, a little bit less. It doesn't have to be precise. With resin, you don't have to be precise. If you had epoxy, I think you have to be very precise, and it's more of like a 2-to-1 instead of just a tiny little bit. Another advantage to this, if I was using epoxy, you can't mix up a whole bunch of them because it's gonna set up before you get a chance to use it. And also, don't try and mix up a whole lot. The more you have in here, the more volume that is in the container, the quicker it's going to cure. So, you know, try and keep your what's the word I'm looking for? Try and keep your batches small so that you don't end up in trouble. Stupid stick I stole from Home Depot. Dang it, if only there was a solution. Hello, I'm Captain Ward. Are you sick of flimsy stir sticks you stole from Home Depot? Try random stick I found on the ground. I've loved this stick for months. Used it over and over. It's sturdy, it's useful, and best of all, I really like it. It's a cool stick. It's a cool stick. I love this stick. Good stick. Act now and we'll throw in a second random stick I found on the ground. Absolutely free. Just pay shipping and handling. This might be too much, but I'd rather have too much and have a good bond than, you know, let it start to set up and have to come down here and mix more. The reality of it is this took a while to do. I did finally get smart and just grab a handful of it and cut it all at once. It didn't cut easy, but it sure made it a lot quicker than doing one individual piece like I started out with. Dummy. I had a happy accident. Turns out I only needed about 1.5 of these. So I ended up with all this extra, and the rest of it I'm using to reinforce that inner skin. You might have noticed from the time lapse, I wedged a 2x4 underneath of it to put the bow back in it, because once I removed the outer skin, and the coring, it sagged a little bit. So I had planned on reinforcing it, and that was going to be the next step, but I just went ahead and used the extra. So while that's setting up, I'm going to mix up another one and put it in. I'm mixing these hot. I want them to cure real fast so that I can put the next layer on, and the sun's going down. I thought I could do the whole project in one video. Going to end up being a long video, so I guess it's going to be a two-parter. Maybe it might even be a three-parter. We'll have to see. But yeah, I'm going to mix up the rest of this, get it on there, and then hop on the scooter and get back to the truck stop. If you found this video informing or entertaining, it wouldn't kill you to leave a like. Hello, I'm Captain Ward. Are you sick of random... This is a train. A train.